Good evening, everyone, for those of you who are watching live. And if you're not watching live, then thank you for looking back at what is the second in this new format of public accountability meeting. I'm Lisa Townsend, Surrey's Police and Crime Commissioner, and I'm joined this evening by Townsend, the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner, Gavin Stevens, who's the Chief Constable of Surrey, and Ned Kemp, who's the Deputy Chief Constable. And this evening, we are taking your questions specifically around national policing priorities, but also other questions around neighbourhood. Some of you have already submitted questions, and we've got those in front of us, and there is, of course, an opportunity for you to put comments and questions in the comments section, so please do. Ellie is monitoring those very closely, and we'll be coming to those a bit later as well. The first thing is just to look at the minutes from the last meeting. They're available online for anybody who wants to have a look at them. They've been checked, and I believe everyone's happy with them, but you can see those on the website. And the first thing I'm going to do after that is to ask our Chief Constable to give us an update really on what's been going on in Surrey since the last meeting. So over to you, Chief Constable.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thanks for everybody joining us this evening. Just to mention as well that there are a set of papers published for the meeting this evening, so if you want to look in more detail at both the local performance or performance against the national plan, then do please take a look online. And we're always open to answer questions at any time. I guess from the national perspective, the one thing that I'd just like to reflect on is a big thanks really to our communities and to all of our officers, staff and volunteers for the incredible effort over the last 2 weeks following the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. As has been widely commented on in the media, from a policing point of view, we had plans that were long in development and well rehearsed, but that is different to putting them into practice at very short notice. And I think officers, staff, volunteers and communities came together really to provide a sombre and fitting tribute to the monarch who'd given so many decades of service. And in policing, we come into this vocation in service of the Queen. We've served the Queen all of our lives, really. So it was also a poignant moment for us, and pleased to say with over 1,000 colleagues deployed on the day of the funeral, it passed off peacefully without any incident or interruption. And I'm ever so grateful for all of the hard work that led to that. So I just wanted to mention that, and briefly also to mention that this weekend was the National Police Memorial service in Belfast. It rotated around the 4 nations. Also a time for us to reflect and remember. I don't think that it's often appreciated that over 5,000 police colleagues have lost their lives in service since the setup of organised policing in the UK, and we had a moment to pause and reflect and remember them, just the duty that everybody gives. And just very briefly coming back to sort of local issues before DCC Kemp perhaps gives us a few highlights from the published performance report. Just to reflect on the summer really as we move into autumn. We've seen some protest activity across the force. Some of you watching or listening may have seen the Just Stop Oil protest that we've seen, which will be very disruptive for motorists and actually cause significant value of criminal damage. We work hard at getting a speedy response to those, and grateful for our community sort of perseverance as we try and tackle that. We've seen a little bit of industrial unrest in Surrey across the summer, but perhaps not as much as we'd anticipated. The positive thing is that some months on now from the end of the pandemic, society is generally returning back to normal with vibrant nighttime economy and so on. That does bring a couple of areas of concern for us. The level of serious sexual offending is a real issue for society at the moment, and we are not immune from that in Surrey. There isn't really a day goes by when I don't read on our sort of overnight record of a particularly sort of terrible serious sexual offence. So that is very much a focus and concentration, and I know Commissioner, you and your office share those concerns as well, and it's something that we're working hard to tackle.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chief Constable, and you're absolutely right, and it is really concerning when we see those reports, and they are sadly almost daily. And also, from both the Deputy Commissioner and I, huge thank you to the force. Deputy Commissioner and I were both very privileged to see the briefing that was given on Monday morning to officers from Surrey and from Suffolk, of course, who came to assist. And we had a huge debt, obviously, to those officers who did that. So thank you. Moving on to the progress against the police and crime plan. Now, this meeting, this particular session is, as I said, predominantly to look against progress against delivery of the national policing measures, which are set by the Home Secretary and the Home Office nationally. But we do, of course, have our own local policing measures, and the police and crime plan which is set by me. So, first of all, an update from the Deputy Chief Constable on how we're doing against that are available as well on the website, so you can go and have a look at the full performance briefing there. I'm going to pick out some questions, including questions that have come in from the public around that. But first of all, Deputy Constable, would you like to take us through what you feel are the highlights?
Yes, thank you, Commissioner. So in terms of actual crimes recorded, Surrey's still a really safe county. I'm pleased to say, fourth safest in the country. And that's something we're particularly proud of and has been recognised by Her Majesty's Inspector Constabulary. Particularly proud of it because, of course, our proximity to London, good road network, makes Surrey quite an attractive place for criminals. So we jealously guard that position. We'd rather people didn't become victims of crime in the first place. Where we are working hard is in terms of solving crime. And I'm pleased to say that we're seeing some improvements there. There's been a lot of talk nationally about solved outcome policing and how they've dropped over the last few years. That's something that we're determined to reverse in Surrey, and the most recent figures in the performance report, June and July this year, we had our highest solved outcomes for a year, which you're pleased to see. We've been doing particularly good progress in areas like burglary of people's homes. If you are a victim of burglary in Surrey and we're fairly safe when it comes to burglary, you will have someone attend. And the chance of us catching somebody who's a victim, and I'm pleased to say, is increasing. We're putting tremendous effort into that area. In terms of violent crime, we are one of the safest counties for that too, but that is a challenge for us, particularly in the areas of domestic abuse, where we know that it's underreported. We're not reliant solely on criminal justice outcomes, and we recognise that there's quite a lot of pressure on the criminal justice system at the moment. Our primary aim is to make sure that victims are safe, particularly in a domestic abuse scenario or stalking. And we've used 36 stalking and protection orders, which we use before sometimes even arrest, to restrict the behaviour of a suspect. And that can stop them doing things, but it can also require them to do things, such as hand over their phone to officers to check, etc. So there's some good progress there, and that's going to be an area of focus for us. We have seen an increase in areas in reports of child abuse, and that is primarily because of, and that's the last year since lockdown, there's pleased to say more children have had more access to agencies such as schools, social care, etc. And we've seen an increase in report to us, but we've got fairly good systems and teams that are well equipped dealing with that. So I'm pleased to say that our response to that is good. There's been some real pressure on us in the area of serious sexual offences, and our central team who deal with rape are now, I'm pleased to say, fully staffed, and there's been an increase in the number of submissions they've made to Crown Prosecution Service and Matters to Court. I would say probably the area that continues to be real pressure for us is our victim and witness care. As you know, it's something that's really important to us in Surrey. The pressure is brought about primarily because of delays in particularly Crown Court. We're working closely with the courts to try and alleviate that. But what we are doing is we've increased the number of staff that we've got in that team to make sure that we try and give victims and witnesses the best support that we can until their case gets to trial.
great. Thank you very much. So we are seeing obviously a year-on-year trend in reported crime going up by 3.8%, which of course hides a lot of the nuances.
Yeah.
But what is this? Do you think this is a national trend, or is this something that we're seeing in Surrey, or are we seeing it in Surrey and beyond? Are all forces still limited?
Well, it's a national trend, and actually the increases in Surrey have been slightly less than nationally.
Really interesting. Thank you. I know it's detailed in the report that people can have a look at online, but there's been some really great work around improving investigations and support, particularly for domestic abuse and child abuse in the neighbourhood teams. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about the work that's gone into that. We're getting some really good results.
Yes, thank you. So investigations into child abuse, domestic abuse, we have bespoke teams dealing with those offences now, which wasn't the case a couple of years ago. That's making a real difference, not least because you've got officers and staff who have a particular area that they're particularly interested in and excel at, that can specialise in one of those teams, but also because it's allowing us to rotate less experienced officers through those teams so that they get a really good understanding of how victims of domestic abuse might respond, because they respond in different ways, some of the safeguarding measures we can put in place, etc. And that's really helped us at a time where those are crime types that we've seen an increase in reporting, which is what we want because we know that they go underreported. We also have reduced the number of incidents where officers would be expected to attend. It would slow those down, and we've actually got earlier contact directly through a team of trained investigators who make contact with the victim at an earlier stage. That frees up crimes that officers actually need to get through. So there'd be two significant changes which have made things more efficient and improved our investigative capacity.
Right, thank you. The Street Safe tool, which is a really great tool, so it's a pilot service for anyone to anonymously report areas where they feel unsafe. Despite a really early, positive, we've seen a bit of a drop-off, really, in its use, and I was wondering if the force had any plans to reinvigorate that and get out there and ask people to use it, because it's such a great tool.
Yeah, so we have used it and overlaid the information that Street Safe's given us with partners. So we've been sharing information with the health service and the council as well, and looking at particular areas where women are feeling, predominantly women are feeling unsafe. And there are some examples of where we've worked with partners and things like street lighting have been put in. Particular alleyways have been closed off to encourage people to walk in safer spaces. And even where there hasn't necessarily been additional crimes in those areas, the reality is that they are fairly safe areas. We recognise that feeling safe is important too. In fact, that's the Surrey Police strapline, is being safe and feeling safe. So we've been working with other agencies to do those. We will have another push in relation to Street Safe. But what we wanted to do was make sure that all of the information we had before, and there was a big response. Several thousand women contacted us to let us know where they were feeling safe. We properly used that information and acted on it with partners. Yeah,
that's great. And I should also say that my office, the OPCC, has recently been successful in a bid for almost £1 million to support work locally around violence against women and girls. And so that's great, and that will be rolling out soon as well, which we're really, really proud of. And there's been a huge reduction in serial DA perpetrators. The force has done some phenomenal work around it, and obviously contributes to the overall reduction of domestic abuse. And I think that that mustn't be underestimated. I know the force has put in a huge amount of work, and we really are seeing the outcomes. But we have, of course, seen a drop in the solved outcome rate from domestic abuse, and it'd be good to understand. One of the questions that I know our office receives, and I'm sure you get, is how do we keep particularly victims and others involved in that process, particularly when they don't necessarily get the outcome that they want. It'd be interesting to understand how the force is able to support those victims.
I'm happy to sort of pick this one up and say that probably the biggest challenge for policing in the coming years that we're working really hard at is that all of the new officers that we've recently recruited, and we've recruited 535 officers since the start of the sort of initiative to bring numbers back into policing. We need to help them to develop and retain them with investigative skills. One of the most, sadly, one of the most common offences that they'll be investigating in their careers is domestic abuse. And we know from all of the feedbacks that we get from survivors of domestic abuse and the support agencies that work with them, that the investigative skills and the rapport and relationship that you're able to build as part of that investigation is crucial to maintaining confidence throughout the whole of the criminal justice system. We also know that the pressure that colleagues are under at the moment, that one of the factors that reduces our level of satisfaction is the lack of regular communication. It's fair to say that we do better at this in domestic abuse than we do in other crimes. So I did look at actually just earlier today at some figures in this, and when we survey domestic abuse victims as to their satisfaction, it's in the high 80%, 87%. It has been as high as low 90s, 92%, but that does drop off when you look at other crime types. So for overall crime, it's at about 60%, and the big correlation is that regular communication between the officer and the victim or the survivor of that crime. The other thing is just that you really can't do overtrain in this area. You know, the academic work, the thinking on what works develops all the time, and we need to make sure that we're continuing to invest in training courses like the AMAT is, like the training that we do around coercive control and behaviour, stalking, so that we're taking every opportunity really to get the investigation right first time. If we do that, I'm confident that we will get more offenders brought to justice. And for those cases where we can't bring an offender to justice, to have some other intervention available. And you mentioned the reduction in repeat offenders. I think one of the things that's beginning to show signs of success there is the behaviour change programme for perpetrators, which I know, Commissioner, you've put support and money behind.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. I've got one more question before I move to some of the public questions in this area, and it's around neighbourhoods. And you actually talked about burglary and how and some progress, really good progress that's being made. The particular question around what is the process that's followed after a burglary is reported? So, what is the decision-making process in terms of deciding how it's progressed with pending? Because it's something that I get asked quite a lot.
So it's a really good question. So if it's a burglary of someone's home, and in the sort of national counting rules, it's called residential burglary, but that also includes sheds and garages. And
that's relatively new, isn't it?
It is relatively new. Yeah, but we recognise that it's a particularly distressing if it's somebody's home. So the call takers are trained in, firstly, what they want to know is how recent you think it was. Is the offender still there? If that was the case, that would be an emergency response without question. If that isn't the case, as is most of the calls in relation to burglary we receive, then there will be a response which we call a grade 2 response. We would try and attend at a time that's convenient to the victim, and that will be to examine the scene, to take a statement, to identify any forensic opportunities, and then there will be some unseen work that goes on with intelligent analysts looking at timing, the modus operandi, so the way that the burglary is being committed, active offenders that we believe might be in the area, etc. All of that work will be done to see if we can start to link it to any other burglary. And of course, once you start to do that, you have a suspect for one of them, and that makes a tremendous difference. And that information is also overlaid and supplied to officers at briefing, etc. So they get proactive patrols around areas that are particularly being hit for burglaries. And we try and make those patrols as focused as possible. So based on time, any descriptions, any particular suspects. You know, I was out with officers a few weeks ago, and they were extremely proactive in relation to suspects that or people that wanted intelligence on who was suspected of burgling people's houses, and we ended up in a foot case with one individual who hadn't actually done anything wrong, but we wanted to talk to him. We were going to conduct a search on him, and he took flight. And so I'm pleased to say he was caught and detained. But that's the sort of levels that they're going to, where there's areas where burglary is a particular problem. And I think it's one of the reasons why Surrey is so safe for burglary.
Well, great to hear. Thank you. Moving on to some of the public questions now that we've got. So the first one I've got is, what are you doing to reduce manual processes, paperwork, and embrace cheap, if such a thing, tech, such as CCTV analysis, handwriting, translation, and speech to text?
Okay, going to take a start on that one. I'm not sure.
I know you're a huge fan of using technology.
Yeah,
I am. Yeah,
it's only fair.
Yeah. I'm not sure I've ever come across cheap technology. No. All of my service, but if anybody out there has got cheap technology, then we'd be pleased to hear from you. There's a couple of things that I'd set as priorities for the force when I took over as chief, and one of them I described about getting the full potential out of the force, and increasingly that's about getting the full potential from our data, and having that data in accessible formats in ways that can be used by everybody has been a real driver for us. Probably the place where they do most of those things that the questioner was asking is on for colleagues is on their mobile phone. So we call it a mobile data terminal. It's the mobile phone. All of the readily available commercial software that you would expect, and I've watched colleagues use this in action on the street if they're dealing with somebody that doesn't speak English, for example. They're using Google Translate as you and I would if we were overseas on a break or something. So all of that stuff happens regularly. We have some fantastic capability for mobile fingerprint. So there's a little reader that plugs into the bottom of the phone that will take a fingerprint on the street and search the various databases. So the on the street technology is pretty good, and most colleagues that come to Surrey, if they've transferred in from other force, always comment on how good they find the on the street technology. Where we've still got lots of work to do, and maybe this is where the deputy will come in, is at point of information first coming into the organisation, where we're recording the call. There is really good technology available now for us to be able to match patterns and trends, identify repeat victims, make sure that there's no double keying between the call receipt software and then our crime recording and the intelligence systems. And we are on the cusp of making a big change in how we handle our telephony and how we handle those initial calls. So now the deputy wants to say just a couple of words on that as well.
Yes, thanks. I'm pleased to say that we are, so that the system that the chief was talking about, we're due to have in Surrey in November of this year. And in fact, we've already started training call takers on it. It's the most modern system in terms of being able to provide call takers with information really, really quickly. It'll help them if you're a repeat caller. If you've called us before, they'll very quickly be able to identify what you called us for and your details. That's really important for people, particularly in distressing situations or an emergency situation, like a domestic abuse situation. They'll very quickly be able to understand what it is that you've been through previously, which helps them in asking the right questions with you. But also it helps us with analysis, and it's a much easier, quicker system for call takers to use. So believe it or not, at the moment, if you call, they're likely to have to put your details in several times. That will be eliminated with this new system. So it saves time, it is more efficient, it's more user friendly, and it allows call takers and those dispatching police officers and staff to victims to work more effectively together.
Oh, brilliant, thank you. I'm going to take a little bit of a break now and hand over to Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner Ellie, who has got some questions from the public.
We do. And a reminder to those watching at home, please keep submitting your questions. We will continue to ask them throughout the night. The first question coming in is from Jeffrey in Elmbridge, and it actually links to what you've just been discussing there, although slightly different facts. How are you improving the 101 service for the community to get quicker response? Wait times can currently be far too long to report incidents.
Okay, so our waiting times for 101 have gone up as high as 7 minutes during the summer this year. It's just worth reminding that 101 is our non-emergency service. Of course, our emergency way of contacting us is 999, and we answer that consistently within a few seconds. So when you really need us, we're on the end of the phone and we'll be there quickly. Of course, 101 is a non-emergency service, and we're one of the few organisations, I would say, that have that operational 24 hours a day. What I can say is there are other ways of contacting us where you will get a response. So you can contact us online, and you won't be talking to a robot, and you won't have an automated response. You will have a response from a human being who has read, digested, and assessed what you've sent us. If it is a crime, it will be crimed and investigated in the same way that it would be if you called her. And that's quite an effective and efficient way of doing that. And we are one of the leading forces as well, utilising social media. So there are now victims of crime who do contact us through social media, and we do have staff that are monitoring our social media accounts all day, every day, to pick those up. And we've seen that that's led to not what we call channel shifts, so not people who would have rung us using a different method of contacting us, but actually more people contacting us, which has been a challenge. We would like the 101 response time to be quicker. We'd like to reduce that from 7 minutes. It is starting to come down again. The summer is a busy period for us, and it has been a busy summer this year. And we are recruiting hard to try and make sure that we have got a fully staffed contact centre to try and reduce those times. You will know that the market is quite challenging at the moment in terms of jobs and recruitment, and that affects us too. But what I'm pleased to say is that a lot of people who join Surrey Police and work for us like to stay working for us. Sometimes they move to other roles within policing because it's a good organisation to work for. So if anybody is thinking of a career change and doing something different, and you want to get some satisfaction out of the job you do and work for an organisation that cares about its people, makes a difference, then please do give us a good hard look.
Thank you. No, and it's really, and I should say also that my office is doing a really important piece of work jointly with the force, looking at 101, both in terms of wait times and the other way around it. And it is really important. I have to say, I remain really impressed with the way the force deals with it. I had to contact a well-known airline very recently and contact them on all of the ways that were possible and never received a response. So I remain incredibly impressed with what our contact center is. Ellie, do you have other questions?
Got 2 more questions on this topic before we move on to the next ones. The first one, a bit of a lengthy question, so bear with me. Tim from Surrey Heath says, Surrey Heath residents again voted for the extra uplift in their council tax to fund extra police. However, we hear that due to funding problems, Surrey Police are no longer recruiting PCSOs, and the plan is to lose 22 through natural wastage. We know the loss of PCSOs will impact the level of service, as they do a lot for the community, as well as taking a lot of the burden from police officers. Can residents be told why police are coping with the current new funding problems, and what is going to be done to alleviate this and the loss of PCSOs?
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that. And the first thing I can say is we're about to start recruiting for PCSOs again. So the big sort of recruitment push in recent years has been for police officers. So we've had a target to hit, in fact, as a financial penalty if we don't hit the target to recruit police officers by the end of this financial year. In order to balance the books, we did have to take a few unpopular choices. One was to manage down that number of police community support officers whilst we hit our officer target. But we are about to start recruiting again. I would like to get back to the position, whether this is possible in financial terms, to the number of PCSOs we had before. But Commissioner, you're well aware of what that financial challenge looks like over the course of the next few years. I don't want to hide that from residents of Surrey, but we have got many millions of pounds to save over what we call our medium-term financial plan, so a sort of a four-year period. Our position as a force will always be to take as much financial risk as we can in order to reduce the operational risk. What I mean by that is if I can put officers and staff on the street and carry the financial risk elsewhere, then we'll try to do that. But I won't pretend it's going to be easy over the coming months and years. One commitment that we did make was with the changes to PCSOs was to make sure that our neighbourhood teams were really properly resourced. And one really excellent addition to the teams has been colleagues that we've recruited for a scheme called Police Now, which is a sort of graduate entry scheme into policing, brings really high quality colleagues into policing. And we've seen an increased number of Police Now graduates coming into those neighbourhood teams. And all of the feedback that I get, whether it's from the local commanders or from the communities whose problems they are solving, they're getting some great successes. And in fact, we're up for some national problem solving awards as a result of the work that they're doing. So a mixed picture, I guess.
Brilliant. One more question, which actually slightly preempts the next topic, but it's a good segue. Dominic from Guildford has said, speeding and antisocial driving kills more than murderers in Surrey, so why are these not prioritised?
Yeah, I mean it is prioritised, along with many other priorities. But the activity that we do on the roads for what we call killed and seriously injured. So it's not just if somebody is killed, but a serious injury can be life changing, not just for the individual involved, but for their whole family and friendship group. So it is really an area of focus for us, and there's a range of activity that the force is involved in, from the preventative work that we do with new drivers, along with our other emergency service partners, and led fantastically by Surrey Fire and Rescue Service with the Safe Drive Stay Alive programme, all the way through to innovative enforcement activity done by a new team that we've set up with additional funding gratefully received, and innovative practice on the motorways as well, with some of the enforcement activity we do against HGVs. There's also some additional speed enforcement camera zones coming with more average speed checks, which we're doing with the Surrey Safety Camera Partnership as well. The camera partnership for the automated speed cameras does, and speed of course is one of the key factors in whether an accident can be more serious or not. Issues something like 100,000 tickets a year from those cameras. We've got more work to do on some of the other schemes, but it definitely is a priority for us. Of course, this is one where we need everybody to just be responsible citizens to use the roads safely and cooperatively with other road users. And I know that many residents will also report into us things that they've seen and recorded on their dash cams, helmet cams, that sort of thing. In fact, as a result, I think, of one of these meetings or a social media contact before, it made us lift the stone on our practice inside the force, and we're making good progress on being able to take those reports from the public and investigate them as well in order to keep the road safe.
Thank you.
So it's definitely a priority.
That's great, and I've had some really great feedback since our last meeting actually around that, particularly for cyclists. So thank you for the work that's been done around that. I know it's made a genuine difference.
Just before we move on, a very quick question for our tech team. We've had a comment to say it's quite difficult to hear. I wonder if there's anything that can be done to increase the volume at all.
We shall certainly try with the microphones, and we'll speak louder.
Joys of doing this live. Thank you very much, Ellie. Thank you for that. Then move on to the national policing measures, which I mentioned briefly earlier. So these are measures that are set centrally by government, specifically by the Home Secretary, around what they see as being national policing priorities. And of course, what they do as well is partly they complement the work that we do locally, and they complement the policing crime plan that I produce. And my office has a duty to report back to the government on how we're doing on these. So moving on to these, Constable, do you want to give us a brief outline of where you think we are in terms of the national policing measures?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I guess the headline on the national policing measures is that where Surrey is positioned, that, you know, the Deputy was saying earlier about fourth safest county in England and Wales, safest in the southeast, the safest nationally for violence with injury. We tend not to come into sort of national government focus on the national policing measures. So the headline is pretty good news. However, what the national policing measures and the National Policing Board does help us to do is to learn from what's going on elsewhere, particularly where there's preventative activity, whether that's on homicide reduction or on serious violence, or the work that we're doing on cyber and drugs. Where there are things that we can pick up and learn from that will help us keep those levels low in Surrey, absolutely we want to do that.
That's great, thank you. And of course, you're absolutely right. We don't actually spend, I suppose, an awful lot of our time when we talk speaking about the national policing measures for exactly those reasons. Yeah. We focus very much more on the priorities within the police and crime plan, which of course comes from residents and organisations in Surrey. But saying that, we are going to look at a few and those that are particularly relevant to Surrey. And it's brilliantly reassuring, I suppose, that overall crime levels in Surrey do remain very, very low. And you've mentioned some of the statistics around that, which is very, very good. Domestic abuse organisations have previously raised concerns, particularly around suicide of those who've experienced domestic abuse, and whether domestic homicide reviews maybe haven't always taken place. Are you, of course, confident that where there have been suicides, where there has been a bit of domestic abuse history, or there's a suspicion of domestic abuse, that they're being thoroughly investigated?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a traumatic area, isn't it? That if you're suffering abuse to such an extent that you get to the point that you feel you've got no other route out, I mean, well, you just can't imagine it, can you? But sadly, it does happen. And we know from dialogues with the support agencies that we work with that even if we were to miss some of those signs in our initial receipt of the information, we've got a good range of partners around us that will alert us to factors that might have been in the past and in the background if we didn't pick them up on initial attendance. And as a consequence of that joint working, we do have one of the highest referral rates for domestic abuse suicides into what's called a domestic homicide review, where all of the partners get together to share information, try and learn the lessons from what happened and put in place any other preventative activity. We do invest in this area in Surrey Police as well. So we have a small but expert team as part of our central public protection function that look at prevention opportunities. We have a very sophisticated tracker for all of the data and information. And in fact, I met recently to talk about that with the coroner in Surrey and also with the lead in Surrey County Council for it. And there is a forum where we look to seek every opportunity to prevent that. I guess one thing just to put it into context is that the work that we do on suicide more generally, not just related to domestic abuse, about what preventative and crisis intervention might help, I think also can have some benefit for those that are in these very acute domestic abuse situations as well. And we have a dedicated suicide prevention officer working for us in Surrey Police.
Great, thank you. And we are all very grateful for the very low homicide figures that we have in Surrey, but of course, any homicide is one too many. But the National Homicide Services Commission is essentially by government. Do you feel, does the force feel, that the support that you get from that service is adequate? And sort of more generally, how do you support families in the aftermath?
Yeah, and this is a question that we pose to those sort of experts that do this work. And as you say, thankfully, homicide levels are very low in Surrey. But of course, when it does happen, I think it's one of our most significant duties to do as absolute a thorough investigation as we can when somebody loses their life in those circumstances. So in our major crime team, we've got over 100 colleagues that are dedicated to this work to investigate major crime, and a small and even more expert group of those colleagues provide family liaison services. So they tend to be selected and trained as a result of their investigative expertise, but also the excellent rapport that they're able to build up with people in the most difficult of circumstances. So if a family finds themselves in this terrible situation, they will be provided with one or more family liaison officers. They're supported by a coordinator, and their role is primarily a link between the investigation team and the family to guide them through what is a very, very traumatic experience. That team will then make the referral onto the homicide victim support services, and maintain that sort of close liaison. But where they need to be signposted to specialists, then they will do so through that service. The feedback that I've had from the team is that system works very well for us. And I know from letters that I've received into my office from family members of those that have lost loved ones to homicide, just what they think of the high quality care that they were given by the teams here in Surrey. And I ought to mention as well that team has collaborated with Sussex, and that gives some resilience across the two counties to make sure that we've got those specialists available when we need them.
Thank you. Everybody will know, I think anyone with access to a television or a newspaper will know there have been some great developments in forensic capability in recent years, particularly with respect to DNA. Are resources or a lack of resources, are they holding back the ability for us as a force to capitalise on this technology and the potential of it?
Certainly not in relation to homicide and serious crime, no. As I've mentioned by the number of colleagues that we've got working in that area, budget is never really an issue when it comes to the more serious of investigations. The dialogue will be with the scientists involved, with the providers involved, if we're doing some groundbreaking technique, as to the chances of it helping us to make progress in an investigation. And often in some of these most difficult investigations, it's where progress is made in new scientific techniques as well. Of course, we also have a team that look at historic cases and go back and apply the advancing technology to some of those historic cases, again, to see whether we can get breakthroughs. Now, that's not to say in general forensic terms that there isn't pressure on budget. None of us need reminding about what's happening to inflation.
No.
And of course, our providers, the commercial forensic providers, they're passing on those costs through as well. So we've seen forensic prices rise by about a fifth in recent times. There's no additional budget for that, so we will have to manage that. But one assurance I will give is that that pressure will not follow through onto those more serious crimes where we've got an absolute duty to do over.
Okay, that's reassuring. We've seen some really horrifying things, less on the side, but in other parts of the country, particularly the killing of 9-year-old Olivia and other crimes in Liverpool, which has been really shocking and very short time, and also 3 deaths in London in July and a 4th again in August. Whilst acknowledging that Surrey is overwhelmingly very safe and has very low rates of violent crime, have you noticed any indication that gun usage is on the rise in the county?
No, I mean, to the contrary, really. So, aside from just firearms, but if we talk about, I guess weapons, Surrey is so we've already said we're the lowest county for violence with injury. Yeah. We're the 3rd lowest county for knife crime. The 5th lowest for robbery, and robbery is often associated with extreme violence in order to do the theft, as it were. And the 6th lowest for firearms. In fact, in the latest quarter ending June of this year, we recorded no firearms discharges in Surrey on the National Ballistic Intelligence Service. So fatalities from firearm in Surrey are extraordinarily low, and sadly, where they do occur, they're more often than not associated with somebody taking their own life as a firearms holder. So related to suicide rather than to a feud between drug dealers or so. Now, we do see feuds between drug dealers. We do see firearms used as a high threat in order to enforce death or to ply the trade. But thankfully in Surrey we are not seeing firearms discharges.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. One other on this particular issue, some of our neighbouring forces have, and other forces in the country, have violence reduction units. Yeah. Surrey doesn't. And given sort of the focus of VIUs around preventative work and how well Surrey does in that, this being perhaps like an obvious test bed. Yeah. Do you feel that Surrey loses out by not having a VIU? Is it something you would welcome in the county? I
would welcome funding for violence reduction unit. I understand the reasons why we didn't get funding for violence reduction unit. So the way that the funding works is that the Home Office look at data that they get from the health service, particularly from acute health trusts and hospitals, and they ask the victims of knife and gun crime that are coming into those units where the offence took place. So it's reliant on the victim disclosing, and some don't, but they will take a postcode for where the offence took place, and that informs where the funding is allocated. As we've said, because of our low levels, we don't get the funding. Now, that's not to say, as I thought I've opened this session, that we don't look at what other violence reduction units are doing and try and take good practice. So, with our partners across the County Council and others, we have formed a partnership to look at this. Again, they do a whole range of activity, everything from prevention work in schools, all the way through to some of the enforcement activity. And where there's good practice elsewhere, if it's relevant to Surrey, that we'll try and implement it. We have got, I don't know if anyone sort of watching or listening has seen the Knife Angel sculpture as it's travelled around the country. That will be coming to Guildford Cathedral next year, I believe, and that will be another opportunity in the county to continue the sort of education about reducing serious violence. The other thing, though, that I'm acutely aware is that we did a piece of research in our force intelligence team, looking at some of the reasons why knife crime occurs, and one of the things, particularly in adolescence, was about fear, and it was the fear of knife crime that was driving them to carry knives themselves. So I'm really aware that as any public service leaders in the county, we don't want to talk this up to be a bigger problem than it is, because we don't want to drive fear in young people. It's a very safe county. There's absolutely no reason to be carrying a knife. And so,
excellent. Thank you for that. And I should say also that my office has ring-fenced £275,000, and we'll be working with police and other agencies in turn children away from knife crime and other crime that's something that the Deputy DCP is working very closely on. I'm going to move now to disrupting drug supply on county lines, which I know is something that's very relevant to Surrey, and something that an enormous amount of work, of course, has done on. And historic ONS data, the Office of National Statistics data taken the crime survey for England and Wales, suggests that drug use since about 2013 has been on the rise, particularly following significant drop-off in the 90s. Have we felt this trend locally?
Yeah, I mean, the work that we do on sort of drugs prevention and enforcement is constant, really. I mean, we are seeing some really good successes, particularly on county lines. But I think in policing, we've just got to be alert and agile to wherever the problem goes next. And the one thing that would really help us is a reduction in consumption. So, and I think if recreational consumers of drugs, as part of your weekend social scene, if you saw the horror and the heartache, the violence and the injury that goes towards getting the drugs to you, whether that's in the country of origin, overseas, or whether it's on the streets of London and Surrey in order to get it to you, then you may think twice. So the one thing that would really help is if it was for people to change their habits. I know the government have got a big 10-year strategy looking to change attitudes on that. I hope that brings some success. All the while that that's taking shape, we will continue our enforcement activity, and we have a specific operation set up that works very closely with colleagues in the Metropolitan Police. As a result of that operation, we've taken out, and I've checked the figures earlier today, 212 county lines since we started that activity, a phenomenal amount of success. And I have to say, significant prison sentences that these dealers get as well. As of today, there are 15 live, active, proactive investigations in relation to that. One of the last things I did before coming into this meeting this evening was a conference call with colleagues that were involved in exactly this sort of proactive work against dealers in Surrey. And we've trained over 300 officers in exactly what to look for in county lines, including what needs to be done to safeguard the children and young people that often get wrapped up in this activity. And if anybody watching or listening has not yet seen it, do look at our campaigns that we've done called See the Bigger Picture, which is all about spotting the signs in your local neighbourhood and local area. And I know some people do, because I saw earlier that we'd had a question in advance about drug dealing in Hawley, in a local pub. I'm pleased to say on that one that the questioner from Hawley that the neighbourhood team are aware of it. They've got a proactive operation planned. They were happy for me to say that in that particular location they are going to put out plainclothes police officers. So if you knew where you are and you're dealing in that pub, then there's a good chance that you're going to get caught over the coming weeks. So please do keep that community intelligence coming, because it really does help us put the resources where they're needed.
Yeah, absolutely. And the lives that are destroyed by drug taking is, I mean, it's one of the things I suppose is the most shocking to me in this role. And there really is no excuse for it. There is no excuse for taking drugs recreationally. Whether you're doing it in the evening or the weekend or whenever you're doing it, just stop. Is our message. So thank you very much. There is there a sense, because distribution has shifted?
Yeah.
Sort of online, text message, post. Has that made things harder?
It just means that we've got to be agile in our investigative techniques, and with any sort of drug dealing activity, there's always the drug itself, the commodity. There's always the communication with getting the commodity to wherever people want it, and there's always the money in return. And whether it's through social media advertising and provision, whether it's through text messaging or some of the methods that no doubt they've developed to in the future, they've still got to move the drugs, the money and the communications, and we will find ways to tackle each of those things.
Good. The priorities that are outlined in the National Drug Strategy, of course, require a lot of agencies and partners to work together, whether that it's statutory and non-statutory, whether it's prisons, universities, festival and event organisers, all kinds. Now, whilst recognising the work that's gone into developing the local partnerships, and I know a really strong local partnership, particularly in Surrey, do you think there are any gaps that require attention?
I guess this is where these national performance measures help, because what we can look at is where areas of the country sadly have a more acute problem, often they're at the forefront of developing new ideas and techniques. The one thing that is beginning to come back, that there was a gap in provision for, is the ability to regularly test in custody, and we've seen some money coming back into this now for drug testing in custody to make sure that we can get people the necessary referrals for treatment or detox if needed. We've had a small amount of money come back into that. I know there's an option for some bigger amounts of funding to come in future years for that. But from a policing point of view, and I know DCC is a national need for custody, the provision in police custody facilities now is really like a secure healthcare facility. So if you come in there with medical needs or mental health needs, you will get the necessary referrals. If we could have the same level of professionalism and service availability for those that have got dependencies, that I think would make a real difference. But back to your question about the strength of the partnership. So we do have a combating drugs partnership. Very grateful to our Director for Public Health for leading on that activity. And, all of this is part of a big 10-year plan for us to try and sort of turn the tide on drugs in the UK.
Okay. I've got one final question on this particular session, and that's whether the POCA, the Proceeds of Crime Act, is still used to maximum effect, do you think, in order to ensure the seizure of criminal assets resulting from the drugs supply? Yeah,
so we do have a dedicated investigators who are looking to get money back off criminals. It's not just through the Proceeds of Crime Act. Those accredited financial investigators will look at other legislation as well, for example, Section 27 of the Misuse of Drugs Act. So any legal opportunities we have to get money from criminals, then we will absolutely do that. And then to work with the teams and with your office commissioners to then decide, once we've got that money back in, where do we reinvest it in order to get good effect. The other thing that we've seen in this area in recent years is just how that team working together with our cybercrime team are able to make progress in cryptocurrencies as well, which is increasingly a method of choice for criminals to move their proceeds about, and we've had some really significant seizures of crypto as well.
Oh, great. That's very good to hear. I'm going to hand over to Ellie, the Deputy Police Crime Commissioner now, who I think also I know does an enormous amount of work with the children in terms of the county lines. work?
Yeah, so the first thing to say is our office has awarded recently £100,000 to a charity called Catch 22, who down in the south of the county have launched a new service for young people at risk or already being exploited criminally, particularly in relation to county lines, and that works with young people across the county, and that's so far going very well. Keith, a question for you that I get asked quite a lot, which I think is really important for us to try and explain to parents and the general community, is what exactly is a county line and what signs should I be looking out for?
Yeah, well, so county lines really is a new phrase for something that's always happened. A drug supply line from predominantly a sort of urban or inner city area out to county towns and village. The method by which they do it, and the line often sometimes refers to the sort of mobile phone line, or it might refer to a name associated with that line, and they do give them street names so they know which supply line they're getting it from. The actual method of communication can vary from line to line. So sometimes it might be through a social media platform, sometimes it might actually be a text message. But it's basically just the line of supply from the central source out to the county towns and villages. And of course, one of the really awful things that we've seen in recent years is the exploitation of children and young people in that supply line.
Do you have any other questions?
No, we've got lots coming in on neighbourhoods.
Sorry, the second part of that question was what to look out for, and that's where I would encourage people to look at the Surrey Police social media feeds and look at some of the campaigns that we've done, because there are some excellent short videos on there that point out exactly what to look for, because sometimes it can be quite stuck.
Thank you. And moving on to one where I know we have lots of questions, not surprisingly, is around reducing neighbourhood crime. And I think at this point we should talk about Operation Blake. Do you want to talk a bit about it? Because it really has been a fantastic. I was talking about it at Police and Crime Panel this morning, because it really is brilliant.
Well, I know the deputy's actually done a presentation on Operation Blake before, and it is up for a national award at the moment. So do you want to take that one up?
It is, yeah. The national awards, in fact, any police force can submit for them, and we've got 2 of the categories out of 5 that was won. So we're really proud of that. And Operation Blink, our operation to tackle catalytic converter thefts, is one of those. And it's one of those where we really thought about our response and the advice that we gave to the public. And applied that, working very closely with some of the vehicle manufacturers. Toyota were particularly helpful, actually, to make sure that the work was targeted and that the police work was effective in it. So we knew that just general patrols to try and deter it weren't effective, and actually the advice that we gave to members of the public was key. So one of the things we did was in the hotspot areas, we told people what to look for, and quite often some of the thieves would disguise themselves with a high-vis jacket, and people would just assume that they were doing work on a car. They'd be very, very quickly removing the catalytic converter, and if anybody doesn't know, there's a part of the exhaust, particularly on certain types of cars, hybrids and so on, that contain some precious metals, and they were trying to access those, and they could sometimes do that in just a couple of minutes. We had some really good campaigns at telling the public what to look out for, some good campaigns about telling the public where they should and shouldn't park their cars, and then we exploited the big increase of calls that we got from members of the public telling us about suspicious activity to further target the criminals that were active, and we significantly reduced the amount of thefts that were taking place. We saw a rise again earlier this year, and we've employed some of the same tactics, and I'm pleased to say we've seen a significant reduction again. And a number of other forces have seen what we've done and employed some of the tactics that we learned.
It's just incredibly impressive operation. I met with the lead officer recently, and it was it was phenomenal. To say, really, really impressive. Some brilliant things work. One of the biggest issues, I think, in this whole issue around neighbourhoods, and I think that we've gone some way, actually, I hope this evening, to kind of bridge the gap, is that disconnect between what we know is happening, and particularly HMI CFRS's recent report and how well we're doing in this area. But between that and the public perspective, and sometimes not helped by some of the media perspective as well, I wonder if you could take the opportunity to address that, and just, you know, how do we make sure that the residents do understand some of the work that's going on?
Yeah, sure. And so I guess the first thing that I'd say here is that for anybody that's felt that we haven't investigated thoroughly enough or taken their crime report seriously, I absolutely get that. And there has been national coverage around, you know, if the police spent less time doing this and investigating crime, then we'd all be better off. The one thing that I'd say that we spend most of our activity doing is supporting vulnerable people. So I've mentioned it on previous meetings, but of the well over 1,000 contacts that we get from the public every day, only about 10 or 15% of that relates to crime on any given day. The vast majority relates to supporting vulnerable people with, if you like, health and social care activities. Now, there's a national debate about should the police be doing that? Should that be for other agencies? Happy to engage in that debate. But I wouldn't want you to think that all of the dedicated women and men of Surrey Police, the officers, staff and volunteers, are not working hard to investigate and detect crime. They are, but they're also working hard supporting vulnerable people in our community. So I give that just by way of context. The second challenge that we've then got is that our organisation has shifted hugely in terms of its experience level. So pretty much a quarter of all of our operational response is in training. I know that's not ideal for our communities, but I would ask you to bear with us because, you know, when they reach the end of the training, we're going to have this, you know, a brilliant group of colleagues that are fantastically energetic and enthusiastic and have got the right skills. And I'm really confident at that point that we will get more cases before the court. And we do, day in, day out, get tremendous successes. So one of the things that gets commented on is, are we doing enough on vehicle crime, for example? I'd love to do more on vehicle crime. We do get some successes. One case that I was reading about last week, a particular prolific offender has just been charged and remanded with a conspiracy in relation to 37 vehicle thefts. Now, I know from experience, now that guy's locked up, there's a really good chance that the vehicle thefts in the area that he's been working are going to reduce. So we do have some brilliant successes like that. One of the other things that we monitor on, and it's a very broad title, but neighbourhood crime, is whether people feel satisfied with the service or not. And I touched on a couple of those statistics early on, but just to sort of revisit them. So this is predominantly activity in local neighbourhoods. 63% satisfaction with what we're doing in response to ASB, antisocial behaviour. 60% satisfaction in what we're doing in relation to crime. So my sort of verdict on that is could do better. The two things that, and this is done by a text message survey with victims of crime, the two things that they say to us regularly that would improve those scores is the frequency of the communication. Do we keep people updated? And then are we doing something practically about it? And if we can work hard on those two things, then I'm sure our communities will notice a difference.
Right, thank you. Back to Ellie for some public questions.
And apparently it's just me that people can't hear at home, so I'm going to lean in and try and speak a little bit louder. First question is from Lisa from Mole Valley. And now Lisa's question is about a very specific location, but I know this is an issue that residents in various places across the county do face. And I also know that there's a lot of work being done to try and combat it. What is being done to stop the antisocial driving based in Hookwood Tesco's car park on Thursday night? Lisa says Tesco has installed rubber speed bumps, but this has just pushed the problem out onto local roads with excessive speed. These hundreds of people, both drivers and spectators, must be organising online and coming in from surrounding areas, including London. They bring other crimes with them and they need something constructive to do.
Well, we did have this in advance, didn't we? So I don't know. We've got a response from the local command, haven't we? I think.
Yes. So there is an operation to tackle that. Absolutely right. The speed bumps have been put in only this month, actually, and they have made a bit of a difference, but it has pushed it elsewhere. So there's an operation to collate registration numbers. A number of drivers have been warned. Some are getting warning letters, and we're using our specialist roads policing officers as well to to target them. So it is something that local officers are aware of and tackling. We do recognise there's an element of risk sometimes with the way that some of those people have been driving, as well as the the environmental impact and noise, etc.
I would say, so if that question has got some specific intelligence, now that the operation has been set up, please do let us have that privately, because that may well inform our tactics.
Yeah. Great, brilliant. Next question is from Jane, and that's just come in live. You've made a number of police staff cutbacks in an attempt to protect frontline posts. Is this mirrored across senior posts at all, which obviously have a significant cost?
Yeah. So in terms of the size of the organisation, actually, that hasn't. I'm not sure how far back Jane is talking about, but that hasn't changed in the last sort of 3-4 years. We are under real financial pressure, so we are going to have to look at the size of our organisation, because most of our budget does go on people's salaries. But what we have done is we've absolutely tried to rationalise whatever we can, including senior posts. And 2 examples would be that are unusual for an organisation the size of Surrey Police. We share a chief finance officer with Sussex Police, and we also share a head of our IT with Sussex Police. So there's 2 examples where normally you'd have one senior person at director level in each organisation, but we share it and they work across both forces, and that's made quite a significant time.
Brilliant, thank you. Jeffrey from Elmbridge says, we're sorely under-resourced by the police and don't have any PCSOs. With antisocial behaviour, graffiti, near misses with e-scooters, etc., the absence of ever seeing a police officer around just helps all that continue. There are also, and you touched on this earlier, a lot of keyless car thefts around Cobham and Oxford. What are you doing to provide hands-on local policing that communities have faith in, especially around budgets and their management?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick it up.
Yeah, I'm happy to take that one. Well, Surrey prides itself on neighbourhood policing, and it is the absolute bedrock of policing. And if you undermine it or reduce it, you do so at your peril. We recognise that, and we've been praised as one of the forces that, through lean times, has kept an emphasis in themes that neighbourhood policing. We don't ever just want to get into just responding to crime. We want to be proactive and preventative. So some examples mentioned there. We do prioritise what we do, and the keyless car theft is really important to us. We're putting a lot of work into that. The arrest that the Chief Constable mentioned earlier, that was a result of proactive policing activity involving our serious and organised crime team, and you can see the sort of result we get. We're going to keep that pressure up, and actually we're determined to bring more offenders to justice for vehicle crime. In relation to some of the other things that have been mentioned, such as use of e-scooters, etc., that is difficult. They have become more prevalent, and I think legislation is struggling to keep up with the actual reality on the ground. But where it's dangerous or there's a particular hotspot, then we have targeted that, and we have seized quite a large number. I don't have the exact figure, but quite a large number of scooters from individuals who've been riding them recklessly or on the pavement or anything like that. So we will take action where it is required. As the Chief Constable said, we're reliant on quite often on the information we get. So we identify a hotspot and it's a risk to people, then we'll take some action.
And I don't know whether it's the same questionnaire or a different one, but we did have a question earlier on from Cobham and Offshot. And the borough commander for that area said that there are 6 police community support officers covering the area, and the local officer. These details are available online to contact for those specific issues. And particularly in that area, the local neighbourhood specialist officer has been working with the borough council, looking at particularly areas that need to be targeted by mobile CCTV and so on. So I don't know if it does relate, but if it does relate, there's activity going on there as well.
Brilliant, and that message of reporting is really important. We speak to people quite a lot who are very frustrated with a lack of response, but often sort of reporting things on Facebook, but not directly to the police. So please do make sure you're reporting things whenever they occur. A very similar question from John in Reigate in Banstead, to get straight to the point, and you might want to come back to this when we talk about cybercrime later and the importance of the balance. But John says, do you intend to get feet on the beat as presence makes the crime go yonder?
Well, it's very, very, very poetic indeed. Yeah, I mean, it's always been part of the Surrey plan to have good footprint. We'd always like more. There's always an opportunity, John, to join as a special constable or a volunteer, I'll maybe come to it at the end. But we're always recruiting, so definitely part of the plan.
Brilliant. We've got two more that just come in. Jane, a different Jane to before, has just asked, what are Surrey Police, and this is a question I'm really passionate about as well, Jane, what are Surrey Police doing about rural crime? Are extra police resources now available with dark evenings and farms becoming a bigger target?
And I should say I had this issue actually raised with me in Mole Valley yesterday, and I was at the civic service as well. I was asked by a resident what more we're doing around rural crime, so it definitely is something, particularly as Ellie said, as we have these darker evenings.
Yeah, so absolutely, and I know it's something that's really important to you, Commissioner. So we have increased the amount of resources that deal solely with vehicle crime.
Rural crime.
Sorry,
That's the
rural
thing.
and vehicle crime. Rural crime, and particularly vehicle crime where it's rural.
Yeah, absolutely.
Rural crime over the last few years. So we do have a team which stretches right across Surrey. It involves there are a number of police community support officers in it, and also police officers. In fact, the number of officers, if you were to go back more than 5 years ago, there was only one officer dedicated to that. There are now 3 officers, and we're hoping to increase that further. But of course, what they've done is they don't just deal with some of the rural crime that we have. They're really good at making sure that their colleagues are aware of particular trends, intelligence, vulnerabilities and hotspots and so on. And they're also been really good, and I've been along and seen it, at liaising with landowners and National Farmers Union and so on, and making sure that we are listening to them about where particular hotspots are, what the concerns are. I've seen some of the work they've done in relation to, for example, thefts of tractors, and particularly the GPSs that have been stolen from them. And I'm pleased to say those have been reduced. And so, of course, they're able also to help escalate things to some of our more specialist teams, motor policing unit, etc., and other when there is a particular issue. We look at things like response times, how long investigations take, and also outcomes of investigations specifically for rural crime. So it's an area that, as of course, it's important to us, and we compare that to areas, the urban areas. And the reason we do that is because it's important to us that you don't get a better police service just because you're in a built-up area. We recognise that you can be vulnerable and isolated if you're in a rural community, and you're entitled to just as good a service. So we do make that comparison. We do have data on that, and it's an area that we want to do better at. I'm pleased to say that some of the feedback that we've had from some of the organisations that span several counties has been particularly good about Surrey and our response, that we do listen and we do try really hard. And we've had some other initiatives using horse riders, etc., to as a horse watch, a bit like a neighbourhood watch, those sort of things. We're going to keep doing that. We have an operational lead who's a chief inspector, and he's very proactive at pushing particular operations with angling community we've done, etc., to try and make sure that wherever there are particular crime concerns that we're acting on them.
That's really good to hear. And actually, I think the point that you make around it's not just those 3 people and growing. It's not just the knowledge they hold, but the knowledge they're able to share. As in Spellthorne, speaking to officers recently who had been dealing with a rather nasty rural issue. And although those 2 particular rural issues weren't directly involved, it didn't matter because they were able to teach other colleagues on the neighbourhood team how to deal with it. And I think it's that sharing of that expertise and knowledge which will really, really benefit Surrey.
And the final question we've had on this topic is from Nick on Facebook, who starts his question by saying, I really do appreciate that the topic I'm introducing is far less important than homicide and sexual crime, but has there been any progress on tackling motorbike noise, especially on summer weekend evenings? The noise really is bad, particularly going up the Leatherhead bypass. Motorbikers love to gun their engines on this uphill stretch.
Yeah, well, I mean, motorbike noise is a really difficult thing to tackle because technically to get something before the court, you've got to have equipment that is really reliable at assessing the level of noise. And there's been a number of trials around the country, not the county, the country, where they've used fixed sites to try and do just that. And it's been problematic, the reliability of the equipment and getting it to a sufficient level where you can prove it beyond all reasonable doubt, which is the balance of proof. What we do is we do have specific operations that target driving, but in this case, riding on motorbikes that is antisocial. So if there are areas where there is a particular speeding hotspot, for example, which tend to go hand in hand with those that are making a lot of noise, then we do have operations to target that. We don't have an operation specifically targeting noise for the reason I've just given it, but those that tend to be very noisy tend to also be riding quite often in a safe way or speeding. So that's how we target those.
Yeah, and it's really important. I was out over the Easter weekend with one of the officers who was involved in that operation around an area, and absolutely a hotspot around Box Hill and Dorking, which we all know very well. And there is quite a lot of work I know going on, particularly around those sort of audio cameras, as they're called. And I have the Department for Transport is doing a national piece of work around it, and I've been working with and supporting Sir Paul Beresford, who's the MP for Mold Valley, so covering that area of Box Hill and Dorking, to bid for some money from the government with this policing to do our job. So hopefully we will see some benefits from that as well. So in that case, I'm going to move on to our second last topic within the national policing framework, which is around something we've already talked about a bit, and I know something that's really important to both of you and to my office, which is improving satisfaction among victims, with a particular focus on victims of domestic abuse. And there has been a lot of investment in this area, and in 2021 and 2022, my office brought in £1.5 million of additional funding in order to support victim services. So I know it's something that all four of us really take incredibly seriously. So I don't know if you want to talk a bit about that, because I know there has been a lot of work going on in the force around that before I delve into questions.
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. I won't cover the statistics again because we've covered them, but just a quick reminder. So the satisfaction that we see from survivors of domestic abuse is generally higher than what we see from general crime types. So hopefully that is an indication of the sort of priority that we place on it. The investment in victim and witness care has been ever so important, particularly post-pandemic, because as we know, the criminal justice process has got a big recovery to do. We know the delays and backlogs that come as a result of that, and sitting with the teams to listen to the extraordinary work that they do to keep those communication lines going is ever so important. Of course, we've had some additional difficulties thrown in, and this is by no means a commentary on the rationale or reasons behind it, but the barrister strikes have also had another bearing on this as well. So if the delays from the pandemic weren't enough, then that also has an impact as well. And of course, the colleagues where this pressure falls is really those in those victim and witness care units. So we can never really do enough. We do have some fantastic volunteers that help us with that. So if it's an area that you're interested in volunteering in, it's very, very rewarding work. As the Deputy said earlier, we do have really regular dialogue with our colleagues in the Crown Prosecution Service and within the court system. I meet directly with the Senior Presiding Judge at Guildford to talk about areas where it is possible to sort of iron out any difficulties. And there is an emphasis, I know, particularly from the court, on where there are cases involving vulnerable victims, to try and get those and stick to the particular trial date. So I guess there's no way to say it other than plainly this is going to be a big challenge for us all until we're able to recover from that awful backlog that was caused during the pandemic.
Absolutely, and you've actually touched on a question I was going to ask, which was specifically around that. And I think you make the point, and it's so important, is that this isn't just about policing, it is about the CPS and the courts and probation services and all the different services working together. And as chair of Surrey's Criminal Justice Board, and we actually have a meeting this Thursday, and one of the things we are focusing on, I should say, is victims and domestic abuse victims in particular, because we're very conscious of them. We have, though, of course, seen overall victim satisfaction has decreased by 5.8% over the last 12 months to June, and June in particular had one of the lowest results that we've seen in 12 months, and domestic abuse satisfaction rates have fallen. Can we turn this around as a force?
Yeah, we can and we will. We've done it before. It won't be easy, and it does come back to those points that I was mentioning earlier. And I know the deputy does an awful lot of work on this through the performance board in force. Is just re-emphasising the things that work with people, and the things that work, are keeping them updated, and then taking practical action to help them out, whatever that practical action is. Often, I mean, great if you can get a case before court. Sometimes it's not doing that. It's making sure that they've got the necessary support in place to help them recover from whatever crime it is that is suffered. If we get those things right, then we can turn those figures around. We've done it before, and we can definitely do it for them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the key is communication, and we really impressed that on officers and staff. Good communication and timely communication, and where we've seen a dip, it's because quite often there's been a particular pressure on officers and resources. You know, we had a particularly busy summer and year, but we are absolutely clear about the communication needs to be. You know, it can't be via text message and that sort of thing. If for example, somebody has a crime that's being investigated and that's been filed, they need to have a phone call and a conversation with the officer. So it's those sort of things that we're making sure that are happening, and that it's timely. And it's when a supervisor looks over a crime and how an investigation is progressing, it's one of the key things that they have to check is that communication is done properly.
Right, I know it's something that those in my office, our office with victims, are really passionate about in terms of supporting you and supporting other services, so that we can all together support our victims. Ellie?
We've got one question come in. It's not specifically on domestic abuse, but it is relating to victim satisfaction. So John from Reigate in Bamford said, as a victim of theft, I did not receive any contact or support from our local station. Do you intend to ask victims if they are contacted, and what, if any, support they receive as a result?
So the satisfaction surveys are done on a sample, so not everybody will get the survey, but it's done by a text message survey. So I would encourage anybody that if you do report a crime to us and if you get one of those text message surveys, please do fill it out, because the good thing about it is that not only do we look at the patterns and trends, but the individual investigating officer can get that feedback directly, and sometimes if something has gone wrong or it's been particularly good, then we can act on it really quickly. The other thing to say about the question there is that, to the mentioned about response from the local station, there are lots of different ways that an assessment about the investigation of a crime are made, and it's not always done at the local station. So the call handlers here on first receipt will make an assessment. We have a specialist unit here as well that will look for those investigative opportunities. If it's a case where there aren't any obvious lines of inquiry, there's no forensic evidence to gather, so on and so forth, then we will effectively put it into our intelligence picture about what's going on, and maybe link it to other offences that then in time can lead to more investigation. So I don't know specifically in this case what's happened, but I hope that sort of explanation helps.
Brilliant. And John, if you would like any further information, please do write to our office, and we can certainly look into that for you and find out what might have gone wrong there.
Great, thank you very much. And moving on now to the final topic for the evening under the National Policing Initiative, which is around tackling cybercrime, which is something I find myself increasingly speaking to residents groups about. And I think is one of those areas where we all want to see more Bobby than the Bee, and Chief Constable, you're delivering them on the ground, which is brilliant. But of course, this is one of those areas where you don't necessarily see, you don't see the great work that's going on, because they really are there for our most vulnerable. But given the specialist and technical knowledge that is required in terms of tackling cybercrime, and it does require a specialist for that, we know that, and we know all the challenges around doing that. Is retention of staff and officers problematic, given the highly competitive recruitment market that we know we're in, and how's the force overcoming those particular challenges regarding expertise? Yeah,
so for the very specialist, yes, it's hard work, because you can definitely earn more money in other sectors if you've got this skill set. What we find though is that colleagues coming to policing are often driven by a sort of higher purpose. So yep, you want to earn a decent wage and We know what the cost of living is like, but whether you want to deploy your cyber skills for the benefit of shareholders or for the benefit of local communities is a choice that people do make. So we're very lucky to have talented colleagues that stick with us for the long term in this. And of course, if you work in this area in policing, you get to work on some phenomenally fascinating, interesting investigations. The sort of work that can bring tremendous reward. This is something where it's not just those specialists that we invest in. Having knowledge of digital investigation is now a requirement for every investigating officer. Really, there are not many now that don't have a sort of investigations that don't have some sort of digital footprint. And there's a sort of tier of responses. So there's a general level of knowledge that we need to have. We're developing some specialist teams. So, for example, we've got a digital investigation support unit, which has been set up recently, where colleagues can advise and inform and in some cases take the lead on particular aspects of digital investigation. If it is cyber dependent crime, then we have a cybercrime unit that are very well networked across the region. As I mentioned briefly earlier, they work often very closely with our financial investigation colleagues, and they do both investigation work, and they also have colleagues that work on some of the preventative and follow-up work. So, for example, we have colleagues that do financial safeguarding. So if somebody has been a victim of an online fraud, maybe a sort of relationship fraud, or they've been a vulnerable victim and lost money, then we have colleagues that can go in and follow up and make sure that they're sort of digitally secure in future. They know how to keep themselves safe. And through that sort of programme, that team have supported over 5,500 victims with that sort of specialist advice. So there isn't an awful lot of work that goes on in this area. And I hope the sort of attractiveness of the purpose encourages people to come into this world. And I'm sure of those 535 new colleagues that we mentioned earlier on, in the course of their career, many of them are going to find themselves with these sort of specialist skills as time goes on.
Yeah, increasingly they're going to stop being specialist skills and start being everyday ones. And I've been lucky enough to spend some time with a number of those teams that you've mentioned, and they really are incredibly impressive. One more question from me before I hand back to Ellie for the final public questions and comments. And this is quite an interesting one. Does Surrey Police work with organisations like the Federation of Small Businesses or the Chamber of Commerce around this? Because, of course, a lot of times cybercrime isn't just affecting individuals in their homes, it's affecting businesses, as we know.
We do, both locally but also regionally as well. So the regional, so within the region, we collaborate on things from sort of counter-terrorism to serious and organised crime to the cybercrime unit, and there's a very good capability in the region that works with small businesses to help them protect themselves. So if there are small businesses out there that have not benefited from some of those programs, they are available to look at online, and perhaps we can ask the team to put a link to some of those in the chat for this meeting this evening. Because there are some really great products out there that can help small businesses keep themselves safe. I'd also encourage, if there are any sort of small business forums that feel that we could do more, then we're always willing to hear from them, because this is definitely an area where prevention is better than investigation, particularly for the sort of cyber-dependent crime, because the offending can be driven from overseas. We work with national agencies to pursue some of those, but much better to prevent it in the first place.
Absolutely, thank you. And over to Ellie for the final time this evening.
Yeah, we've got a few miscellaneous questions that have come in. Some linking back to things we've already discussed, and a couple that I think we might actually both want to answer about slightly different topics. First one from Joe, which links back to county lines, which is an excellent question. A lot of children involved in county lines have some form of neurodiversity. And Joe's framed her question specifically for the Commissioner, but I know you'll both want to answer this. I wonder what the PCC and the police will be doing to support these children, but also youth reoffending in Surrey for children with neurodiversity.
Yeah, well, I think there's much greater awareness in society about neurodiversity, and that's true in policing as well. So, in fact, very, very recently, the joint Surrey and Sussex Police officer teams had a fascinating presentation from some colleagues that lead on neurodiversity within the organisation, and that was twofold really: how we support colleagues in the organisation who are neurodiverse and use some of the additional skills that they bring into policing, but also what that means for our service provision externally. Specifically on the county lines point, sometimes perpetrators and offenders will look for methods and ways to exploit children and young people, and if that's because they're different for whatever reason, so it could be neurodiversity or some other reason, then they might use that as a lever to get them involved in crime. One of the things that we've been spending a great deal of time doing is raising officers' awareness on things like adverse childhood experiences, on those sort of early intervention and safeguarding programs, to make sure that we're spotting the signs as well, recognising where somebody might have an additional vulnerability, and then making sure they get the right support. If the question has got sort of specialist knowledge in this area, then we're always open to learn from those with knowledge in the field as well. So we'd welcome them getting into.
I think that's true.
So the only other thing I'd add is following a coroner's inquest recommendation, we've put together a 1-hour video with partners in relation to autism specifically, and that training has gone out to all of our neighbourhood policing teams at the moment. So that's all of our response officers, but it's also been woven into training for new officers. So by the end of this year, all operational officers will have seen that.
Yeah. That's great, and I know it's something that Ellie and I have talked about a lot. It's something we talk about a lot in the office around those with neurodiversity, whether it's as victims or those who want to make sure they feel safe, or the parents of those who want to make sure they feel safe. And certainly working with the High Sheriff and others as well around school leavers or school exclusions and where that can be a factor. It's something that I think is very much top of our mind. And when we talk about diversity in policing, and we talk about a diverse community, neurodiversity is a really important part of that conversation.
A slight supplementary question to this from Alex on Facebook. How do you support children with these issues who have become involved in drugs, and how do you try and steer them away from those areas of crime?
So if they are a victim, a survivor of that activity, then we'll refer them to the necessary support agencies. If they've become involved in offending as well, we do pretty much everything we can within our power to try and keep them out of the court system. So Surrey is one of the highest users of what we call out-of-court disposals, particularly for children and young people. We have an excellent scheme called Checkpoint. So what the team will do is try and look at all of the circumstances around that young person, see what support they need. If they're willing to work with us as well, then often we can keep them out of the court system, because we know if they obtain a criminal record as well, then that can be really detrimental for their future sort of education and employment prospects. So we work really hard to do that, and we've got a brilliant team that do great work in that area.
And as I mentioned earlier, of course, we have a fund within the APCC specifically to support young people, and to do everything we can to help them engage with other agencies, whether divert them away from crime or where they have been involved in crime, to support them.
And there's certainly a lot of brilliant partnership work around our young people. Alex has also asked a question on a slightly different topic, two parts. Firstly, and this is a question, Commissioner, that you and I get asked a lot. Alex is concerned about how the lack of street lighting can cause greater fear of crime in some areas, which is a great question because it links back to street safe, which we discussed right at the beginning, and how that can sort of even facilitate criminals. So Alex was wondering what the force is doing to try and counteract that, or support communities where there might be concerns about lack of lighting.
Yeah, sure. So, well, the first thing I'd say is if you search online Street Safe Surrey, then you can report a particular location to that Street Safe tool. Clearly, lighting is an issue for the local authorities, not for policing, but we do have, if you like, a hotline to our local authority colleagues. If we think it's an area that is either a generator of crime or is causing particular fear, typically what will happen is that there's partnership meetings that happen at the sort of borough and district level, where the issue will be discussed. We'll look at other data involved as well. and we try as a group not to jump to what might be the obvious solution. If there are other ways to solve it, we can. But if it comes down to street lighting, then we won't, hesitate to ask for it to be put back on. Whether that's from a fear point of view or from a crime reduction point of view. On the latter, we did do quite a bit of research to see whether there was any real correlation between levels of street lighting and actual levels of crime, and there's no real strong evidence to say. And now that may be because we enjoy very low crime levels across Surrey, but typically that's not the case here in Surrey. And often where lighting is raised, it's an issue about the fear, which of course is equally important.
Oh, it is. It's absolutely as important. And we need to make sure, particularly we work to our violence spectrum and guide strategy that's tackled.
Two more questions for you. First one, what is the board doing around fly tipping?
Well, fly tipping is primarily an issue for local authority enforcement, not for policing. If there are organised crime elements associated with that or opportunities to do joint operations, then we will do so. But fly tipping in the first instance needs to be reported to your local authority.
Brilliant. And final question, a very topical national related question from Jay in Farnham regarding the recent letter publicised by the Home Secretary. How will you, Commissioner and Chief, decide between you, work together to decide what are symbolic gestures and what is important work to build trust with minority communities? Small question.
Very interesting question.
Yeah.
I mean, police. There's a phrase that has guided me through my career, which is that policing needs to be for everybody, or it becomes for nobody. And we will always work hard to build links with all of our communities, whether they're minority communities or not. How that activity is interpreted is for others to interpret. But what I am absolutely steadfast in is that if we want our communities to trust us and to have confidence in us, then we need to do lots of community engagement activity. The two go together. It also goes together with low crime levels as well. So we will continue to be an open and engaging force for everybody.
Yeah, and I think that everybody is what's important. And listening to those who don't feel that they're represented is absolutely important as well. And so I think that's it's difficult because that's a continuing conversation and something that I know the Home Secretary feels very strongly about too.
Brilliant. That's all the public questions we've had, and I know they've closed them now. So thank you to everybody who did submit questions today.
Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this evening, or if you're watching later, thank you for that too. I'm going to give the Chief Constable the last word because I know there's a few things he wants to talk about as well. So over to you, Chief Constable, to give a final word for our viewers.
Thanks, Commissioner. It was really just one message to say thanks for joining us this evening, but also to say that it's a great time to join policing. You've heard this evening about the huge range of challenges that we cover. We are actively recruiting. We have national targets to meet by the end of the financial year, so the end of March next year. And we've got spaces on our intakes in the new year. So if you were considering that policing might be a career for you, then don't hesitate. Get in touch. There's a selection centre in November of this year, which would, if successful, would get you into policing and a new career before the end of the financial year. The other thing to say is that if a police officer is not for you, then we're also actively recruiting across many of our specialist functions. We've talked this evening about IT, about our communications work, about the wonderful colleagues in our contact centre. That's an area that we're pretty much recruiting for all of the time, because often it's a stepping stone into policing. We see colleagues come into our contact centre and move into intelligence roles or to become police officers. So if you're thinking of some time in policing, then please do look at the opportunities on offer. So, and on that note, I'll say thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody.